Thank you for having me. I'm I'm really excited to be here for a few reasons. One is that I feel like this program and the change and the refocusing of the name even represents a change that I've undergone in my own life. And I had to go to Sweden to pursue a master's because I didn't feel like there was anything that was practical and applied and had facilitation skills in Canada. So that's where I went. And learning about this program and what it's trying to do seems like you guys are already doing it. So that's pretty cool to me. And there's something about how we come together and learn in communities that when we actually try things out and experiment, we start to reach new possibility. So I'm going to speak a little bit about how we can activate people for thriving places. I think there's a lot of other reasons and ways that change happens, but by first identifying how change happens, where are the levers in the community, how have things also been blocked before in the place that you live? Because by understanding that, sometimes we can figure out a new path that can actually make it work. So this is a quote that I really like that reminds me of the place we're at in the world. The whole globe is shook up, and what are you going to do about it? When things are falling apart, you're either going to become more fundamentalist and try and hold things together, or you're going to forsake the old ambitions and goals and live life as an experiment, making it up as you go along. So I feel like this is a really appropriate approach to how we need to look at community development and engagement, is if we're pretending that we're not experimenting, then we're missing the whole point, because change right now in the world is changing so rapidly that we have to adapt constantly, and experimenting in this field is actually still something that we need to do. It's still pretty new, and awakening community capacity and community spirit is something that no one has the perfect formula for. So I like to think of my life that way and to keep kind of encouraging different ideas to inspire me in what I do. So just in brief, in summary of before we even get into it, if I could say there's 3 things I'd want you to walk away with. It's just start somewhere, start anywhere. Begin with what you know, begin with what's in your backyard. Don't wait till things are too perfect, because that's how we're going to learn. And in everything we do, think in an appreciative approach. What are the assets and the skills? I think you guys do this a lot in the program, actually. It's a better way than looking at problem solving and thinking about what we've done wrong. But if we can focus on what already exists, that's a lot more empowering for people to see how they can achieve large things in the future. And lastly, something that I really like and think is very transformative is the power of playfulness and fun and creativity, and actually awakening people to see that change is possible too. Because when they see that, I think they actually start to break down some of the limitations that they have that constrain them. So I wanted you guys to all take a big breath, because sometimes we're bringing in a lot of baggage from the rest of our lives, from work we have to do, from something we're going to after this. And just to take that moment and be present where we are, we can actually accomplish a lot more together. So I'm going to tell one story about placemaking, and then a few different examples of different kind of creative interventions we've used in community transformation. And I'm going to focus in on Halifax. I've done some work abroad, but I think there's something amazing about coming back to a place and trying out different things with a community and seeing what change we can actually occur in the long term. So in the north end of Halifax, there's a seniors' home, and there was 400 seniors that were kind of moved in there from their families who couldn't take care of them, and they were moved into the north end, and all they heard was that the north end is a dangerous place to live. So a lot of them didn't even go outside. They didn't feel they could walk around the neighborhood. But this neighborhood's an incredibly rich and culturally diverse and vibrant place to live. There's a lot of young families, artists, a wide range of community members that would love to embrace them but didn't know how to reach each other. And this is something we found out after we actually began, but this is also a neighborhood where traffic is going really fast down the road. They're using the street as a thoroughway to commute in their way to work. But there's been a few accidents that have occurred on the corner, and the neighborhood kind of rallied together and said, we need to do something about this. And at first people said, maybe we need a speed bump, or there's some way that we need to slow cars down. What about stop signs? And some other people said, I think there's probably a more creative solution that we could create if we all got together around this. And so we started very simply having potlucks at neighbors' houses and just gathering around food and talking about what mattered and what we wanted. And someone heard of a project in Portland, Oregon, and in Brazil. And those projects kind of inspired us to say, what could we do that's more creative, that's using the arts, that's actually very playful, but that achieves something permanent in a short amount of time? And that was called placemaking. And so we began and started engaging with the seniors' home and a local school and all the neighborhoods. And the first step was actually about going door to door to invite people into the process. So what we found at the door when we were talking to neighbors was this is how they perceived the community as well, like the seniors. They felt that they were isolated and alone, fragmented. They didn't really know how they could affect change in their own environment. And I think a lot of people have this attitude that the physical structures around us, they're static and they're stuck, and who are we to know how to change that and make them any different than they are? But actually, I believe we're all incredibly creative and powerful, and it's more about how do we inspire curiosity and evoke appreciation in each other and in ourselves and start to uncover those gifts. And I think when we do that, that our community actually looks a lot more like this, that it's vibrant and culturally active, it's connected, that people know each other. They know they can borrow a cup of sugar from their neighbor, they know that they can borrow a tool, and they know that when a challenge occurs, they can achieve it and they can work together to solve it. So a lot of us know that community members have all the power and resources and wisdom to change their own reality and make resilient community. But until we believe that, until we feel it with our entire bodies, I don't think we're going to change actually the larger system. And I think we're still in a model of professionals and citizens and experts and everyday people. And until we actually are all on the same page that we're treating people as the ones with the resources and knowledge and power, this isn't going to change. And so I think using a collaborative process is part of it, that when we come together, one model is a circle where we come together around a fire. That's a very ancient tool to have conversation and to look into the center of what really matters to us all. So how do we shift from that attitude of control to enablement? And so this was the street that we began with, where the seniors' home was around the corner and people were rushing through the intersection. And when we look at streets like this, we have them all around, we don't often imagine what can be there. And that's a really hard thing to do, actually, that kind of pushing past to imagination and possibility in a place. But that's what we did here, is we created intersection painting eventually, after 7 months of working together collaboratively to enliven the public space and to create a kind of outdoor community living room in our streets. So this is all about kind of how creative interventions can unleash spaces for reflection and participation in culture. And so as we started going door to door to uncover what people believed mattered in their place and understanding what they envisioned, we also created a neighborhood community board on the corner. And that was a very simple act that we did kind of outside, but it became a place where people put both notices for upcoming events and love notes to the neighborhood, and actually became a great physical spot where people started to cross and meet each other and intersect. And as they did that, they also started to share knowledge and information and ideas, and they also started to trust each other. And over the 7 months of workshops, we were designing a painting that was going to be a representation of the identity of the place that we all lived, but really it was a kind of an excuse for us to meet each other, to connect, and through that building of trust and belonging and sense of ownership along the way. And in everything I do, and I think this program is the same, how do we start to think about in every different sector of our place, where are underutilized resources? Who's the neighbor across the street that might actually have an incredible skill that we didn't know about? And who has an extra space or a garage that maybe we could use? And these are the kind of things and the connections that we rarely do in a neighborhood, where now we live so independently, we're so self-sufficient that we don't know how to always rely upon each other anymore. And the power of visioning together and dreaming. So this whole process right in the middle is about, we have to dream. If we don't open up that sense of possibility, if we don't actually look towards that future vision, we're not ever going to get there. We need the right amount of magnetic pull to actually pull us towards our vision. And when we do that, we come alive, we see possibility, and we let go of some of those limitations that were holding us back. And here, it's also about using the art. So in this placemaking project, on the left, we had these flags where every person made a flag of what they loved about the community. And then we strung all the different flags together and put them up in the street. And on the right, we were working with a local school. And there's something about working with young people that's really incredible, because the same reason I think by using the arts, they don't have the same limitations or kind of barriers that we put upon ourselves. So they think really big and bold, and the more outlandish, the better, because those are the ideas that end up inspiring the rest of us. So at the end of it, after we kind of accumulated all the dream, eventually there's something about doing something pretty quick that I think is powerful. So we have one day, a festival, carnival day, where we had Legoland and face painting and all sorts of games, and we had 10 bands and DJs and food, but we also were painting a mural. And so we had different artists that had taken all the different ideas of the neighborhood and collected them and synthesized them and said, this is who we are. These are the kind of qualities and the symbols of our place that really matter. And then we had this mural. This one was on a laneway in Halifax. And we had, I don't know if you can see, there's an ice cream cone that represents the ice cream factories that existed on the corners a few decades ago. And there's hands that are tightly holding each other because the local school said that was a really important symbol for them. And at the far end, there's these vegetable garden, because there's a lot of community urban gardens that are popping up, and people said, that is who we are, we need to show that. And so now when people walk down the street, they're not only walking down and remembering some of the unfortunate things that have happened there. There's been some violence on the corner, and some people said they were scared to go there. But they see the beauty that they created together, and there's now this positive reflection of who they are. And the other excuse is that people met on that day. So as I was painting the ice cream cone, I met another neighbor that I didn't know lived on the street, and we talked and shared some stories. And they said, I'd love it if you could help me pick those tomatoes. They're ripening. I need help. So, we can volunteer to support each other in some very small, tangible ways. And something all the way along that I think we need to reinstill in society and our communities is the power of story and narrative. So something on the day of that we put on too was we had a very simple little booth where we had a typewriter and a clothesline, and we said, write a love note to your neighborhood, or write a story, a memory from this place. And as people did, they actually sat down, families or friends, and they wrote like these beautiful stories of what had happened there. And when we put all the collective stories up on the clothesline, it created a new narrative together that we hadn't seen when we were all talking about our own little story. So now I know when I pass by that was also where someone met their fiancé 10 years ago, and they moved back to the street. And someone else had this incredible moment with an encounter where different people gathered and started playing music together. And so all these things kind of layer on top of each other and build the fabric of the place that we are, but we often don't take the time to uncover those stories that exist. And in the process of painting together, having the excuse to do something in the physical world, we created these relationships. So different ages, different cultures, we're meeting side by side and sharing skills and even simple things of how to paint, but also bigger life lessons. And on the right is my friend Kate, who to me is a perfect example of someone that got involved in this process early on, but gave so many different things, discovered so many of her gifts that she could offer to this project. So she was both a circus performer, helped with food preparation, she was a musician that played accordion, she had puppets going, but also she was there painting on the day of. And this was a way that I think many different people could offer some small part to this, where they were contributing in a meaningful way, which is I think what a lot of us want to do is we yearn to actually contribute to something bigger than ourselves. So how do we allow for an opportunity where people can give whatever small or large part they want to give to something? And we had a lot of games too. There was someone on the street that was really passionate about making sure we had a bowling alley, a croquet set, we had a chessboard, we had pinball machine, and there was just like games in every direction. So there was little ways that people could engage. They could go paint for a while, listen to some music, and then play with someone. And in the process, they met another neighbor while they were at it. So as I've said before, there's something about working together that I think is really important. We don't have enough excuses. We used to have barn raisings and ways that we needed to rely upon each other. So give people the excuse to create something tangible, and I think a lot of these intangible benefits will come out of it. And something we often forget is to celebrate. We have these incredible moments and community initiatives, but we don't always take the time to step back and commemorate the beautiful things we've done together. So at the end of our placemaking initiative, hundreds of people stood around the edge of the circle, and we asked everyone to light a sparkler and make a wish. Make a wish for themselves, for their neighborhood, and for the world. And when they did that, afterwards we burst out into big song and dance, and there was musicians, and we actually had trouble getting people off the street when the party ended. But it was a beautiful way to have a moment of ritual and to stop and say, we've done something together here. And so my hope is that these little opportunities of making a wish will not only go out into people's lives and continue into what they do, but also now other communities are popping up with placemaking initiatives. So there's an official program in the Halifax municipality where any neighborhood can apply to make a similar project happen. And so there's 4 communities next year that might do something similar, and 3 have already happened in 2 years. And I hope it happens in Wolfville and everywhere else as well. And how do we create these very simple things that people can do in their own ways, in their own community? So there's something great about reclaiming public space and making streets actually for people. And so all kinds of things came out of the placemaking initiative. There was, yes, relationships and yes, something beautiful, but also cars actually slowed down. It became a safer place for people to walk and to play, for kids to come onto the street. And the seniors, they feel safe now to walk outside, because when they walk around, they actually know who lives behind the doors. And if they fall, or they know who to call upon, and they feel it's that much easier. There's been a lot of relationships sparked too between families and youth in the neighborhood and the seniors, where they're having dance parties and they're sharing food together. And these relationships didn't exist before. And there's a whole range of other projects that have come out of it now. So there's the community board, new people have taken over, and it's changed, and there was a bench out for a while. People want to create an outside community sharing library. There was a neighborhood band that people are creating. Someone else wanted a tool sharing library. And so all of these different things start to spiral out. And to me, that's the real point too, is that people see that they can pull upon different people and their different skills to make these things happen. So that's one project and process I'm really passionate about that shows kind of what we can do in 8 months, but also people kind of feel like it's short enough that they've changed something in their own backyard in a quick enough amount of time. Because often we get bogged down with what we can't do, or that we need a government legislation to help us with a project or an official program, but there's also these very simple things we can do. But now I'm going to share a few different models of engagement that we've used in other processes. And so that was an 8-month project. What would we do if even in one event, we were having a community meeting about imagining Wolfville? And I like to think about the invitation for that is actually just as important as the whole thing. If we invite people, like we go door to door, or we write a really powerful question on the invitation, something simple, you're going to invite people into the right space. So when they walk in, they're not coming there to yell at the microphone and say what they disagree, but actually contribute and feel like they're ready to have a meaningful voice in the conversation. And when people come in, make sure you have people even greeting them at the door. I've heard of somewhere where they had a red carpet even out to show that someone was really welcome when they came in. What are different little signs that you can do to make sure people know that this is a place where they're meant to be? And in everything we do, how can we do things that great cultures do? How can we have great local food? How can we have local musicians playing? Creating an atmosphere where we actually want to be. And then as soon as possible, my ideal is getting people into small group conversations. So we're not, I'm here at the front talking to you. Ideally, we'd all be having conversations and collaborating and sharing ideas. And there's something magic about the number of 3 to 4 people, that's kind of replicating the kitchen table conversation or the best conversations that happen around a fireplace, because they're intimate enough that we can actually get to know each other and we share things that are personal. And when I asked you at the beginning, is anyone sitting beside someone they don't know? And there wasn't that many hands. I mean, maybe it's a small enough place that you guys know each other. But also, I think there's something that we're tempted to go, even in breakout conversations with people that we know, a spouse or a friend or a colleague. And as much as possible, I even try and say, are you sitting with people you know? Okay, let me actually introduce you to some neighbors over here. And they're not so scary after all. And if we want new ideas or innovation, we actually need to encourage that cross-pollination of diverse people getting together. In everything we do, how do we use the arts? So this was a Nocturne, the Art at Night festival that happens in Halifax. And the first year of it, we had a large map of this urban core of the downtown of Halifax, a 30 by 30 foot map of the city. And we gave very simple instructions. We said, build the city as it is or as you wish to see it in the future. And we had a ton of broken up cardboard in the back. And we didn't know if people would actually engage with it, but people did. There was over 700 people that came into the doors that night, and they actually sat down and built little prototypes of models of what they wanted to see. So people made Ferris wheels and renewable energy and dance halls downtown, and it became like a city chessboard for conversation of what we could make happen. And some people said, no, we need parking. And someone else said, no, it's much more important. We have a pedestrian street here. And so you actually got to check in with what your community felt about these different ideas. And although some of them kind of seemed outlandish or far out, even just the act of trying them, building them, and seeing them exist started to switch people's minds into what else they could make happen in their community. And some of them now have turned into be projects that people are working on. And so these are a few different other models of engaging community that I think are, how do we engage people and intercept them in their daily routines? Because people are so used to going to work, and then after they're done work, getting in their car and going home, and not actually noticing what else is around them. And people are kind of, sometimes they're over-engaged too. They don't want to come out to an event because they're already doing their own thing, and it's really easy to kind of take care of your own life. So we took actually huge speech bubbles out into Cole Harbour, outside of Halifax. And for a project, we were trying to engage people about the open spaces and planning issues. We took the speech bubble and we had a band of musicians follow us around, and we took it to the highway, we took it to strip malls, we took it to hockey arenas and to parks. We were trying to find, where are the people? Because we couldn't find them. But what we found was, it was just kind of out there enough that people actually engaged with us and said, what are you guys doing? And that kind of spectacle allowed them to engage and trust us. And then we got to ask them, like, what are your visions for public space? And then we collected all the ideas and put them on a website so everyone could see that this was all the different ideas, and that actually was part of the invitation process to come out to the subsequent events. And then in the middle, those are all stickers. We had a huge amount of stickers laid out on a fence, and it says, I want blank on this street. And we were redesigning a street in Halifax, and we wanted to get feedback about what the place could be like. And so every day, these started to get filled up really fast about, I want to see a fountain here, I'd love a bench, what about this idea? And it was just enough that it was very simple for people to contribute, but also something interesting for them to be a part of. And the last one on the right, have you guys seen the new library, the central library that's coming up? A few nods. So that was a pretty incredible process, actually, and participation too, and how we got to that design. And at the end of it, even though people have been engaged all the way through to design what the library would look like downtown, they didn't want to stop there. They said, we've had such a good experience, we want people to feel a part of it, even as it's getting built. And so we built 15 chalkboards and put them up on the fence, and it said, in my life, I've learned. And every day, all 15 chalkboards got filled up, and you can see people are reaching to get to the very top one. And people wrote just sometimes very beautiful things and sad things, and sometimes very silly things. Like, I've learned to listen well. I've learned to be patient. I've learned to be brave. I've learned to listen. And so what else can we do that brings the kind of very personal into the public realm? And now all of these ideas are going to inform some of the design of the interior of the building too. So in all of these things, I think there's actually some principles that we can pull out of it to inform all the work that we do when we're creating resilient communities. So number one, I like to think about, how do we provoke that curiosity and wonder by connecting with people in their everyday environments? Two, how do we ensure that there is actually a real need and authentic intent to engage? So when we have an event or a process, let's be transparent about what people can actually affect. Because I think often that's why people get disillusioned for good reason when they're part of something, and then something else happens that they didn't think was going to happen, and they don't see their ideas reflected in it. So be very clear about that. And the third is, how do we understand the landscape and the situation of the place? That's kind of the first stage, I think, of the sensing. Who are the people? What's the geography? What are the dynamics that exist? That question I asked at the beginning of how do we make change happen in our community? Really going in depth with that and asking a number of kind of key people in the place you're working. and use the arts and various learning styles and dream together, because we all think and work differently, and if we actually account for all the different ways, it's going to be more interesting for all of us. And this last one, I think, is something that we know but we often forget, that living systems will only respect that which they are part of creating. So in everything we do, how can we remember to think experiential and interactive and participatory? It's actually about finding that purpose. It's not about, changing everything and doing it all, but if we can figure out what our part to play, we can actually do it. In thinking about this, I like to think about a metaphor. And there's this great quote I'm sure you've all heard of in community development, but never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And there's a metaphor about a whale, a blue whale that's an incredibly large mammal, something like 2.5 school buses long, if you lay those out. And for it to make a complete turn, it takes several minutes. It takes like 4 minutes for them to do that complete turn. So it's actually quite incremental. But a school of fish that's the same mass and weight, it's just as large, and the collective intelligence of them, they're all going along and they're weaving in between things and they're acting as kind of one mind or one community, you could say. And all of a sudden, sometimes one fish starts going the other way. They start going against the grain and working against an issue. And then sometimes a few other fish start to follow and realize, oh, that other fish has wisdom, and they just start intuitively. And at first that seems really hard, but all of a sudden, it doesn't take, over 50% actually, like we often think. It's around 13.6% is the tipping point. And all of a sudden, they all go en masse. In a millisecond, they all turn around. And I love to think about that when I'm working in things that seem really insurmountable, and we're working, feel like we're moving a rock up a hill, that we don't need to change and to shift everyone's mind or behavior. But if we get a committed group of us on track and feeling that purpose and knowing our skills and working collaboratively, we can make incredibly big things happen. So the last things I'd love you to go away with that I believe in all my work and in CoLab, in the work that we do, small collective actions can make huge impact and lead to big change. And 2, how do we encourage that all voices get heard? So I think there's a beautiful thought that goes, if you leave conversations go too long without every person in the room speaking, the chance of them speaking again actually goes down. So right away at the beginning, if you get every voice heard right away, I'm that much more likely to speak again. And I've noticed that in myself, that if I don't speak early on in an event or engagement, I'm that much more unlikely to raise my hand and say something. So make people feel comfortable right away and encourage every voice. And lastly, to celebrate our communities and to do work where we are. Yeah, thank you for having me.